And we're thankful to welcome back Coptic Minister Lori France to this evening as we gather. And Lori is a retired Mott Community College teacher in Flint, Michigan, who has spent 20 years in the Michigan school system as a high school teacher and community college instructor. She has studied metaphysics, and since the mid-1980s, she's been a part of that and becoming a Coptic minister also in 2007. She facilitates daily study groups via email. A Course in Miracles is underway. That whole year-long study group got commenced in January last month. And she became a Coptic minister once again in 2007. She also facilitates daily study groups via email on A Course in Miracles, and which I did touch on, and to study non-dualism and the meaning of oneness from many traditions. Today, she touches on a great topic for right now, which a lot of us are facing: decisions.
Okay, greetings, everyone. So, decisions. I titled my talk with these words, decisions, because it reminds us, it leads to the hundreds of decisions that we make every day, every hour, and close to every minute. These are not all monumental decisions, of course. Some are very minute, like, I don't know, shopping for groceries. Should I buy this brand or that brand? Driving on the highway, should I stay in the right lane or move over in the left lane? But all decisions can be made with guidance, big and small. And our wonderful Master Hamid Bey has quite a bit to tell us about this in his lessons. So let's look at his teachings from lesson 63, and we will find some insights about making decisions in our lives. In this lesson, he lays out the truth that our tomorrows are affected by each one of us, as well as by every individual in the universe. And everyone has a plan of life. And he asks us to ponder three important questions. And the first one is, am I trying to run my life on the premise of ego consciousness? And second, have I left God out? And third, have I ignored divine guidance in my plan of life? Divine guidance. So the key point here is that we should all surrender all of our decisions in life to divine guidance. And that is the sure path to following the principles of a spiritual plan rather than the ego's plan. Now, there are some very powerful lessons regarding decisions in lesson 111 and 112. And the title of both lessons, this is from the Hamid Bey CD content, Be Guided by Divine Power. And a part of lesson 112 is so powerful that it is actually repeated word for word in lesson 271. So here we find the Spirit also tells us to accept through inspiration, goodness, humbleness, and faith any situation and use it as a step up the great step ladder we must all climb. Listen to the spiritual self, to the God within. In other words, make your decisions through divine guidance. And now that I've turned 80, and looking back at all the major and minor decisions in my life, I can clearly see how all of my decisions impacted my life in many ways. But the big question is, how do we make ourselves receptive to divine guidance? And Hamid Bey gives us 12 steps to accomplish this. And as we review these steps, think about how this may have played out in your life. So step 1 is control your conscious thinking. The quality and intensity of our conscious thinking determines whatever comes to you, be it health, environment, success in your longed for goal, every experience. So you must become aware of your thoughts. So often we just let mind chatter take over, and we must begin to focus on the greater good, no matter what the situation is. And my becoming aware, more aware, took an early turn in my plan of life. So if you don't mind if I share a bit here, I grew up in the 50s. And I was a young, wild teenager by my parents' standards, although they were not religious and never went to church on Sunday. But for some reason, I felt guided to take a bus to a church, as the nearest local Catholic church was nowhere near where we lived. Then after high school, I moved out of my parents' home after a little altercation with my stepfather over my wild behavior. And I moved into a very tiny apartment, and there was a Catholic church nearby. So I began taking lessons about Catholicism from a local priest. And not long after that, in the early 60s, a good friend of mine decided that she was going to become a Catholic nun. And she asked me to go with her to various convents for interviews, which I did. I felt very much the presence of Mother Mary in my life. And I remember being at church once and feeling her presence right there in front of me. And I just have to show you this little statue, because this little statue is about, 65 years old. She's been my little Mother Mary since I was a teenager. Had her for a long time. And I was also very moved by a movie that came out in the early 60s called St. Francis of Assisi. And it gave me tremendous inspiration. And then I decided that I would go into the convent. And so, just for fun, do you recognize the person in this photo? That is Sister Mary Clare, named after the first Franciscan nun. Anyway, so my step one was to achieve this new goal in my life, to become a Catholic nun. So think about any major decision in your life that led to more conscious thinking and less mind chatter. I know this certainly did for me, and it totally straightened out my life from wild teenager to a spiritual person. Now, step two is never stoop to the folly of entertaining fear thoughts. Do not fear the past, the present, or the future. For fear and trust in God cannot be entertained in thought at the same time. Fear closes the door to God and right living. So my next example I would like to share is that after being a nun for 6 years, and I had become a high school English teacher at a Catholic high school in the Detroit area, then I left. And looking back on that, I feel I was divinely guided to leave when I did. Instead of falling victim to fear thoughts about life after the convent, I found a job teaching at a local public high school in the Pontiac area. And it seemed like everything fell into place after that with no fear thoughts. And then I met this guy on July 10th, 1971. And we got married on July 10th, 1972, exactly 1 year to the day after we met. I guess no fear thoughts there, I guess. And so now step three is think positively. Think of God's promise. He will always be with you. Realize your oneness with God and his supreme power, and thus drive fear away. In other words, trust. Always trust that God or love is there for you no matter what is happening in your life. No matter what it looks like, whatever is happening is in your best interest because it is there to teach you something. And it seems like an example of that was when earlier in my life, after my marriage and birth of 2 children, I was still attending Catholic Mass every Sunday. And I arrived at the church and I was running a little late, although I saw people going in when I pulled into the parking lot. I walked up to the door and it was locked. It would not open. I stood there for a couple of minutes and then I left. I got back in the car and I drove home. God seemed to be telling me something. Then a couple of weeks later, a friend suggested to me that I should go to the Unity Church of Flint. And when I arrived there, everyone was so welcoming, giving big hugs. And I was in the bookstore area where this wonderful young man in a wheelchair took me over to the bookshelf and said to me, "You should read this book." And the book was A Course in Miracles. So that was my introduction to the course. The locked door at the Catholic Church totally changed my life and pushed me forward on my spiritual journey. So think positively. Then step 4 happened, which is know that you are living in God's presence and that He will aid you when your desires are right and good, not selfish or gained at the expense of someone else. And His presence will diffuse your entire being. Having gained this contact with God, and you will feel it when you have, then relax. Think happily that God will guide and direct you, and you will receive inspiration as to how to proceed. And my divine guidance back in the 80s when I was a flannel shirt and blue jean mom was that I felt inspired to become a Mary Kay salesperson. And it wasn't long before I ended up with a free pink car for a year and a fun trip to Texas to the home of Mary Kay herself. And that guidance in my life created a pivotal turn in everything. A couple of years later, a Mary Kay customer suggested that I begin teaching at Mott Community College. So I applied there and became an adjunct instructor. And a couple of years after that, my Mary Kay success got me a full-time job as a program director at Mott, marketing and promoting their distance learning program. So your guidance may be an intuitive feeling or perhaps a simple suggestion from a friend. God was guiding me in the right direction. And perhaps you've had guidance like this from a friend as well. And this seemed to be leading me to step 5, which is there may be times when your load of responsibility seems greater than you can bear. So you become discouraged, dejected, depressed, and your mind and body do not coordinate and function as they should. So alleviate and lighten the load by putting your affairs in God's hands. Say, God, take over from this point on. I can do no more by myself. And that totally seems like what I did at this next part of my life. After 30 years of marriage, I felt guided to walk away. That was very difficult. But I feel like I really was putting God in charge at that point in my life. And I left on November 18th, 2001, and seemed like it was really meant to be because I was called to court on November 18th, 2002, exactly 1 year to the day into my marriage and exactly 1 year to the day out. It looked to me like it was part of a greater plan and that divine guidance was very much in charge. Now, here is step 6. In the course of daily living in a high or low position, there are always those who would emulate our actions to some extent. In other words, we are all teachers in a sense. This means we are responsible not only for our own actions, but for those who would pattern their actions after ours. This is too big a responsibility to carry alone. So once again, call upon divine power to help you in making your actions worthy ones to be followed. So we all have a role in others' lives. Perhaps active teachers or simply an example of joyful living. And it seems like my next step in my life was to create an opportunity to play a role in others' lives when I decided to join the Coptic World Service Order in 2003. Another person who became a major player in my life also decided to join WSO that year. And if he had not joined then, and I had not joined then, I would never have met him. So my wonderful friend and partner for a dozen years drove all the way from Asheville, North Carolina, to participate in WSO. We became very good friends and began taking wonderful trips together. And I think you all know who I'm talking about, but in case you do not, here is Ron. Anyway. Now step 7 is spiritual growth is attained through striving, through giving, and by practicing the golden rule. The more we give, the more we get. Keep the giving on the positive side of the ledger by constantly practicing living in his presence. This means keep your thoughts in constructive and creative channels. And of course, giving here is more about giving love rather than material goods. And it seems like I got constructive when I bought some acreage on top of a mountain outside of Asheville in 2006. I went down there to live in an RV trailer while planning to build a house on the property. I put all my time and effort into creating this house, including having blueprints drawn up and improved, and having a septic system put in and a well. But late one night at the end of that year, I woke up with a profound thought that I should not build a house, but buy a house. But basically, I ignored that guidance, although I did check in with a couple of real estate agents about houses for sale. And that makes perfect sense when we look at step 8, which is love of God and love of humanity are of paramount importance, for it is upon love that the universe was founded. Express love to your fellow man, not superficially, but wholeheartedly in acts of kindness. And the acts of kindness you might participate in might be some charitable organization, or you may be guided in another direction, which is where I went next, which is step 9. And step 9 is spirit is always with you and is not limited to time, space, or location. Under all circumstances, remember this great truth. So your divine guides or angels are with you always. Remember that you, the real you, the you as spirit, you are safe. Trust that no matter what happens, God is with you and all is good. And divine guidance had other plans once again, and trust is huge here. Trust that love is taking you wherever you need to be. I received an email from a real estate agent with a new house for sale. I made an appointment with the agent and went to see it. It was lovely. And it's the house you see in the background here. I called Ron to see if he could come by to see the house with me. So we were standing at the dining room door at the back. So it's a big sliding door. And Ron said, "Hey, that's a bluebird box." And I said, "How do you know that's a bluebird box?" And he said, "I just know." And within seconds, a bluebird flew in and landed on the box. And somehow that was the sign. I put an offer on the house. The owner sent a counter offer and I accepted. And by that afternoon, I had bought that house. A total reversal of my entire last year of planning to build a house. Crazy, right? Or divine guidance from a bluebird. So then step 10 is, when you seek divine guidance, do not ask within yourself when you will get your answer. Just do what you think are right and good will come to you. So that's pretty simple. Do good things, and good things will be returned to you. And this one reminds me of when I started going through the course again back in 2013. And in a couple of months, an idea popped into my head that perhaps I could start an email study group. And I could send out the daily year-long lessons every day. And I started doing that. And now today, with my 3 groups running, going all year long every day, I email close to 300 people who are in the 3 groups. So we all become teachers in one way or another. And now step 11. When praying to God, fill your entire being with the joy of anticipating and receiving his guidance, for by so doing, you harmonize yourself with him, a necessary requisite. So that's a good one. Love is joy. Live in the joyful anticipation of wonderful guidance coming to you. And my reminder that my divine guides are always with me. I have these little angels that sit on my windowsill in my bedroom. And I always give my divine, my guidance to them, asking for divine guidance all day long. And the last step is step 12. Be thankful and grateful for his guidance, for this is another way to harmonize you with him. There is in man that which, when opened, will enable him to draw forth from universal knowledge anything he may wish to know. And now looking back at all the many steps in my life that brought me to where I am now, I have to be grateful for all the synchronicities in my life that brought me to the peace and love and joy that is part of my everyday life. Oh, and I use a simple method to reach out to my sweet angel guides every day. And I think I've told you this before, but I use a pendulum. I ask their advice on every minor little decision and everything throughout my day, every day. Divine guidance. So looking back on your lives and going forward, do you look to divine guidance for your decisions? Are you aware of your thoughts? Are you grateful for your guidance? It's always wise to contemplate the guidance you are receiving in your plan of life. So that's it, everyone. And I would love to hear from you if you would like to share any decisions that you've had and perhaps any way you use to communicate with guides in your life every day. Divine guidance. Thank you.
Lori, thank you. I was just thinking about this today. I remember when I was going through WSO and we're down in Kalamazoo, you were going through teacher training that year, and you shared a little bit about your life, and you mentioned that you were a nun. And I was just thinking about that. It's like, was she a nun or not? It's been so many years since I've heard this, and I'm so glad you shared that part of your life tonight and in your story. And I agree with Pete, who commented in the chat room. You do not look 80, not at all.
What?
She doesn't look 80. Get your joyful living showing through.
Sure do.
Yes.
I really enjoyed your message, Lori. What lesson were the 12 steps in?
The 12 steps are in lesson 112 in the Hamid Bay content and the CD, and
Okay.
also repeated in lesson 271. It's interesting because it's word for word the same information, but it's there. It's good. It's very good.
12 and 271.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So how was your decision after you bought your house, which is nice? I wonder what nice to see the picture of it. And the property you had, did you have to send out the thought for guidance how to sell that, or how'd that work out for you?
It eventually worked out. That's kind of a long story, but I could have sold it almost immediately for double what I had paid for it. But I did check in with Divine Guidance and said, don't do it. But the guy that wanted to buy it was the real estate agent didn't care for him much, didn't really, like him. And so I kept the property instead of giving it up for 120,000 cash. It was crazy, right? It was just land with a well and septic system. But after that, I had to hang on to it for 3 more years before I actually sold it. But I did sell it for more than I paid for it, so it was all fine. And the people that bought it were quite lovely. Anyway, that's it.
A happy ending. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a chance to go down and visit Lori down there, that's a beautiful home that she has. I've been fortunate enough to visit the place and spend a little time down there, especially when Ron was down there. And I've been to the property that she was talking about, this little drive up in the hills. It was very, very nice, very pretty. So it's and it's a great talk that you gave concerning the different parts of your life. It's quite a quite a way of explaining where you're going to and where you've been from, and kind of enlightening, very pleasant.
Can I ask you a question, Lori?
Sure.
I was wondering, when did you lose your fear?
Well, I can't say honestly that I have totally lost my fear, but I do concentrate on that a lot. It's a really big thing in the Course in Miracles about not living with fear. As a matter of fact, the course ends in choose love or choose fear. It's it's 2 different directions, and so I have been working on that for quite a long time, and I don't know, looking back, I guess when I did walk away from my marriage, I did go through a little depressing time at that point. So that's definitely fear going on there. But it didn't take too long before it all bounced back. And then the next year I met Ron. Hey, how good can it get, right?
Yeah, right.
So the resilience is there from your faith, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that in this move, having just 3 months to downsize and get everything done. It was kind of scary, but there was something deep down inside of me that said, it's all going to work out. It's not your time, it's God's time. And anytime I would get really, really scared, I'd stop and think, God's will be done. And I would get calm again. So there is something to remembering that. You don't know how it's going to happen. I had no idea how it was going to all occur, but it did, and I'm here, and it all did work out. So just remembering God is in charge, I'm not in charge.
Mhm.
And another thing that was really another affirmation of the move, when I walked into the building, an apartment 2 doors from my apartment had this name, Janice Seward, on the door. And I thought, well, I know a Jan Seward. I wonder if Janice Seward could be Jan Seward. Jan Seward is a Unity minister here in Columbus. And I used to take classes from her at the Unity Church in Columbus before there was one in Delaware. And she's a wonderful lady. And it turned out it is her. And the month before that, she moved in based on a gut reaction. And she had no intention of moving. And she went through the same process that I did. And we keep communicating with each other because we're both going through the exact same emotions and feelings and remembering God is in charge. And this complex has wings A, B, C, D, and E. And we are both in wing A, 2 doors apart from each other, moved in 1 month apart from each other. Now, what more of a confirmation?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good time to be around like-minded people, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
And the fellow who is in charge of welcoming new residents said, well, I was familiar with Unity Church because when I was in the service, we were in Missouri, is it Missouri? Kansas City, Missouri. And we went to the Unity Village there and attended some of the services. And I thought, well, that's interesting. A lot of people have no idea what Unity is. And so here, I have had within a couple of days, all of this confirmation. So now they're going to have to find out more about the Coptic Fellowship too. That God is in charge and who knows what's going to happen next. It'll be interesting to find out. Won't it, Lori?
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful.
That was a great story. Appreciate your sharing your life with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
I have a question for everybody here. Has anybody ever gotten a guidance and argued with it?
Mm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Leanne.
Okay, so this is a good one. This is a recent one too. I I got a message from my mother to be careful around the car, right? So here I am and I'm driving carefully and I'm just like, double checking everything I do. And I'm moving a cabinet with my husband out of the back of the car. And don't I end up breaking my knee out of the deal? So that happened 2 months ago. And the upshot of that is that I ended up with no cast and it healed perfectly. And I was able to weight bear after a week and a half. It was just, I meditate daily and I think that connection, that personal connection really does pay off as well. There's my story.
Cool.
I think that's a great question. There's been 2 times that just come to my mind of times when I had guidance. I was told by my intuition voice, spirit guide to do something. One was, oh yeah, get your Christmas cards out early. It's only December 2nd, but get them out now. Well, it's early. Why do I have to get them out so early? Just get them out now. And yeah, that was the time when a card went out to the certain person who died the day after they got it.
Oh.
And I was able to get a special message of love to them before they died. And I knew that when I heard that was why Spirit had said, get your cards out now. But it's too early. I don't need to. And, I mean, that's just a little thing. But then when in buying my house,
And died the next day.
I was told, my, spirit said, ask your ex-husband to help you. I don't like to talk to him. He's so, he's so hard. And, he's so, good. And finally I gave up trying to buy the house. I think you all know this story, but so I woke up the next morning after I told the realtor, just scratch my name off. I can't swing the deal. And my guidance was saying, but you never asked your ex-husband like I told you to. But I don't like to talk to him. He's so harsh. Just do it. Okay. So I did. And, his present wife ended up instructing him to just give me the money because I raised his kids. Just give it to her. She raised her kids. So I got the house.
Story.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, when I bought the house that I lived in before I moved here, I drove by the house many, many times with a for sale sign and always said, that house has always intrigued me, but I can't afford it. And for a month, I would talk about nothing but that house that I couldn't afford. And I could not get it out of my head. I would dream about it. And I finally said, what are you doing? You're supposed to be positive thinking. Stop saying, I can't afford it. Start saying, how can I afford it? And boy, as soon as I did, everything turned around and everything fell into place. So
Wow.
you have to listen to guidance. It doesn't let you go if it really wants you to do something. And the fact that all of this has fallen into place, I think it's the same guidance getting me out of the house. I haven't sold the house yet. It isn't listed yet because I didn't have it empty until yesterday. And in order to get pictures, I had to get it empty. So we'll see what happens next. The saga continues.
The way the market's going today, if you list it tomorrow, it'll probably sell tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's what everybody says. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't wait
Yeah.
longer than necessary. Don't know how long it's going to stay like it is, but
Strike while the iron is hot.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Is that divine guidance?
Well, it could be.
Hmm.
From Jim.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, as they say, God can speak through anybody.
Thank you.
I had, there was something that happened at Unity many, many, many years ago. It's a traveling minister. He didn't have his own church, didn't want his own church. He traveled around and did like workshops, and he would talk on a Sunday. So he was doing this thing in an evening. It was called being slain in the spirit. So they just like touch you on the forehead and you fall backwards. So they needed catchers and everything. And I was there with my friend, and we both said, we won't fall backwards. And we did. So several years forward, and a friend of mine was in town who used to live here, and she and her husband were going to church out at St. Anthony's, and they were doing this out there. And I was asking her questions. I said, I think I've done that before. You think it'd be okay if I came? Oh, sure. So I go out there, and I didn't realize I was in for, they did a rosary, then they did a mass, all this stuff before church. And so I didn't have a rosary with me. I haven't had a rosary in years, but I'm saying the rosary and using my own words, kind of like under my breath, because I'm about words, and things that strike me as not being empowering. Probably several people have heard me say, I think careful is a fear word. I like to use mindful. It's like caution, caution. And I think when that first came to me, I thought about, was it Space Family Robinson, and the robot would come in, warning, 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 Will Robbins. That's what it came, Anyway, so Oh, so and then in the mass they kept talking about how you have to be careful because Satan can disguise himself, and it sounds like, good loving stuff, and you have to be all this really negative stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm starting to really angst. It's like I can't do this. I can't go up and do that because this stuff is it's so negative. And all of a sudden I heard, Holy Spirit can work through anyone. And it was like taking a great big sighing breath. It was like, just kind of, and it's like, what am I going to do? Because this is what I came here to do. And now I'm not going to do it. Anyway, I did it, and it was a wonderful experience. But I fretted through the rosary, through the mass, that I couldn't go do it. And then that came to me, Holy Spirit can work through anyone. So I just let that be and intentioned that that's what was happening. And it was nice.
And I'll just put my 2 cents in that. Thank you, Michael, for mentioning James Twyman.
Oh,
because I played a CD of James Twyman when my first husband died when I was 50.
Oh.
And when James Twyman put out an invite to go to France and do the steps of Mary Magdalene, against all of who Therese had ever been, I flew to France alone to meet James Twyman and 28 other pilgrims I hadn't known. And that was where I picked up my French souvenir. Traveling with James Twyman, I found my new husband.
Wow.
And there was no rationality how I would have gone to France all alone to walk the Camino. But that voice, everything worked out fine, and we're sitting here pretty fine.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So David, what inspired you to go to France?
The wine. No. Actually, Nancy, I had just gotten back from Mexico and gifted a friend on that trip. So I spent about 10 grand.
On her.
I hardly ever open up James. I got an email from James that I hardly ever opened up his stuff, but I opened up this email and it said somebody had dropped out of the trip. So I sat back, I asked, what am I supposed to do? And I heard this voice say, go. So I put my name in the hat, and that night he called me up and he said, if you want to go, you're in.
Wow.
So 3 months later, I'm going to spend another 5 grand. And I was actually told by a friend, they knew about Therese, but they were told not to tell me because I was working on my relationship with Yeshua and Mary Magdalene and such. And so that's the main reason I went. Little did I know that I would, meet my beloved on that trip as well. So, yeah. But that was, you talk about divinely guided. There was no question that trip was quite magical.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you say yes. I use the acronym of a STAR. You surrender, you trust, you allow, you receive. So you just be a star and watch what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I remember running up to him, on our walk and talks for the Camino that one next morning. What was that star thing again, David? It was fun.
These are fun stories. Anybody else?
It's fun when you say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I
have a story to tell. And I think most of you know the story, but John and I were engaged, and he had been a bachelor. He had never been married. And as we got closer and closer to the wedding, he started getting cold feet, and I knew what was happening. So finally, I just, said, hey, if you're not ready, then I'll bless you on your way, and so long. And that was on a Thursday. And then the next Saturday, the couple days later, I got the message to call my girlfriend and go have coffee with her, which I'd never done before. Okay. So we get, my little boy and I, we get in my little beetle bug and we start heading over, and we're on Leonard Street. And I have to turn left on the street that her apartment building was on. So I'm driving up, and over the hill at the same time comes John in his red Corvette. I couldn't believe it, you know? What? So I had to give him the right of way. That still pisses me off. But so he turned right, and he goes into the same parking lot, and he goes into the same building. Well, I don't know. I was all shook up. He was shook up. So later that day, we got together and talked about it. But Spirit wanted us to be together. You know, I mean, there was no getting around that. Had it been 5 minutes, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Although I think I would have recognized his Corvette.
Yeah. Well, that was when the beauty met the beast right there.
Yeah.
That's when I realized I was a beast and she was the beauty. So
Aw.
those are just coincidences, but that's life. You never know.
So when did you get over your cold feet?
No way, Jose.
Yeah. All's well that ends well. 50 years later. Can't believe that either.
When did you celebrate your 50th?
In September.
Oh, gosh. I didn't know that. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. We went to Mackinac Island for the weekend and had a glorious time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori Joy, for the message tonight with Master Ahmed Bey's works. And Lori, thank you. For another opening, inspiring message. Your story, your wisdom, and everybody that participated tonight. Blessings, everyone, and look forward to seeing you next week again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great evening.
Thank you.
Nice to be with everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Very nice, Lori.
Beautiful
Appreciate
evening.
Very nice.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.